Welcome back to Hannity and Colmes. I'm Sean Hannity. According to the federal government, alcoholism costs Americans more than $80 billion a year. In fact, it's estimated that more than 14 million of us abuse alcohol in some way. Now, some say alcoholism is a genetically transmitted disease which creates an inability for a person to stop drinking, and therein lies the problem, because others argue that a person becomes an alcoholic because of their environment, and alcoholism is a character flaw. Joining us to discuss this, Stanton Peele, the author of The Truth About Addiction and Recovery, and Dr. Douglas Talbot, the president-elect of the American Society of Addiction Medicine, and he is also the medical director of the Talbot Recovery Campus, and he joins us from Atlanta, Georgia tonight. Let me turn to you, Mr. Peele, here, because if we say alcoholism is genetic, and people are predisposed towards alcoholism and they can't prevent this from happening, aren't we really saying that human beings have absolutely no control over their behavior, no ability to say no?
Well, alcoholism is one category of a large number of behaviors. For example, cigarette smoking. Right. If we tell people that they're predestined to be addicts or alcoholics or cigarette smokers or obese or any of a number of things, what's the likely result of that? We're actually going to get more people with all of those kinds of characteristics. So
in other words, we've made an excuse for them, a built-in mechanism to say it's the genetic predisposition that caused me to be obese or to drink too much or be a drug addict even, or even a murderer. Some people say.
Well, you're emphasizing perhaps maybe the punishment side. I mean, we can look at it from one standpoint and say, well, a person can come to us and say, I couldn't help, as one woman recently did, getting in the car drunk and killing a man because once I started drinking, I had no control over my behavior. In fact, when we make it clear to people that they are to be responsible for their own behavior, they're less likely to act in that way. But let's shift over to the other side. I don't want to just be put in a position of sounding very punitive and right-wing. Mm-hmm. What's the best way? What's the best? I want Alan to be on my side as well. I want you both.
Right.
What's the best way to get people to actually be able to improve their behavior, to change behaviors that are hurting them, like cigarette smoking? Do you think if you tell somebody you're predestined to be a cigarette addict, that's the best way to get them to quit smoking? By the way, 45 million Americans have quit smoking. That's the toughest addiction to quit. Would you agree with that, Doug?
If my father can quit after 40 years, but go ahead, Doug.
I think we're missing the point in many ways. If you talk about alcohol or you talk about cigarettes or any other addictive kind of behavior, what you're talking about are three kinds of people. There are users, and then of the users, there's a segment who are abusers. And of the abusers, there's an individual who crosses a biogenetic wall and develops the disease.
Well, Dr. Talbot, go ahead. Do you want to finish your thought?
No, I just want to say that there is no question anymore in organized medicine that alcoholism is a primary psychosocial, biological, genetic disease.
All right, but Dr. Talbot, everything predicated on what you just said, if we go with this notion, I've always said that the number one problem in America is our failure to take responsibility for our actions, but we're saying to people that they're not responsible for their actions. It's a genetic predisposition for alcoholism, obesity, for drug addiction, for murder even, some people are making the case.
No, wait a minute. You cannot get the disease unless you have abuse. Abuse plus the genetic predisposition results in the biological defect in the medial forebrain bundle.
Doug, can I ask you a question? Is there more alcohol abuse now? Are there more people abusing alcohol today or fewer today compared to 25 years ago in your view?
In my view, there's probably more abuse today.
Now, would you agree that starting in 1975 with Betty Ford that we really radically increased our awareness of alcohol dangers and treatment for alcohol? We had a big jump then?
I agree.
How is it that we have more alcohol abuse today after we had this growing awareness of alcoholism, telling people about the disease nature, increasing vastly the amount of treatment, and yet we have more today?
Well, because I don't think America realizes and appreciates that this is a primary biological disease. And I think it's one of the things that organized medicine, and certainly the American Society of Addiction Medicine, has dedicated itself to educate people that it isn't the issue of addiction.
Mr.
It's the
Peele,
issue of abuse.
overwhelmingly, people seem to believe in this country that it's kind of a combination of the two. There may be some weakness involved, but there's also some predisposition, where a large percentage of people who are alcoholics have a history in their family of being alcoholics. Doesn't that tell you that there's some kind of genetic link
You know,
here?
a man who believes in the disease theory of alcoholism is named George Valiant. You've heard of him, haven't you, Doug?
Absolutely.
He went into a community in inner city Boston, and he found one ethnic group was 7 times as likely to be alcoholic over their lifetime as another. Do you know that? 7 times as likely Irish Americans are 7 times as likely as Italian Americans. Irish Americans actually believe more in the disease theory. They were more likely to abstain. They were more likely to describe themselves as being under the control of alcohol. So it goes well beyond what
Yeah, but
individuals...
80% of alcoholics in treatment have somebody in their family who's also alcoholic. But we've got to take a break. I want to press this point with you when we get back in just a moment.
Yeah, I want to talk about the recent research on this too.
All right, well, we'll also open up our telephone lines. You know the number, 1-888-TEL-FOX. We're glad you're with us on Hannity and Colmes. Stay tuned.